On April 14, 1986, Karma 52 checked in over the Mediterranean, its radar altimeter steady, just a few hundred feet above the sea. The F-111F was part of an 18-ship U.S. Air Force strike package bound to hit the literal beating heart of Libya, each jet armed with two 2,000-pound Pave Way II laser-guided bombs. 10 days earlier, a Libyan bomb in a West Berlin nightclub had taken the lives of 2 American airmen and wounded dozens of civilians. Karma 52 was now inbound with Washington's response. Low, fast, deadly, and supposedly unseen. Yet in Libya, a telephone rang inside a government compound that changed the fate of the world. Who made the call and how was never established. What happened next to Karma 52 is still not entirely known. Muammar Gaddafi was not yet 40 when he seized power in Libya. In 1969, the young army captain, wearing aviator sunglasses and embodying a borrowed aura of Nasser's pan-Arab dreams, toppled King Idris in a coup so swift it barely stirred the streets. At first, Gaddafi styled himself a revolutionary statesman, publishing his Green Book and preaching a third universal theory that mixed socialism, Islam, and his own eccentric philosophy. However, beneath the rhetoric lay something far more dangerous, an obsession with striking at the West, and the conviction that terror was a legitimate weapon. Oil revenues became the backbone of his shadow empire. Instead of building prosperity, he funneled billions into weapons, intelligence, and militant movements abroad. With it, Gaddafi soon transformed the country into a fortress state and a safe haven for extremists. He threw open training camps along the desert coast. U.S. officials estimated that as many as 8,000 militants cycled through these camps every year. They learned small arms, demolitions, and hijacking tactics. Their airfare, weapons, and salaries were paid by Libyan oil money. Gaddafi wanted to be seen as the vanguard of international revolution. By the late 1980s, Gaddafi had built a reputation as the world's most flamboyant sponsor of terror. His reach wasn't abstract. It was measured in bodies. In 1985, Gaddafi backed Abu Nidal, one of the most dangerous terrorists of his generation, whose operatives specialized in hijackings, shootings, and indiscriminate slaughter. That November, his operatives seized Egypt Air Flight 648, diverting it to Malta. When Egyptian commandos stormed the jet to end the standoff, the rescue turned into carnage. Nearly 60 people lost their lives, some caught in the gunfire, others unable to escape the burning cabin. Gaddafi, far from denouncing the violence, publicly praised the attackers, calling them martyrs and hailing their deeds as heroic. Just weeks later, on December 27th, Abu Nidal's operatives struck again, this time at the airports in Rome and Vienna. The attacks unfolded almost simultaneously, with gunfire echoing across the crowds and explosions ripping through the holiday rush. 19 passengers perished, and roughly 140 others were wounded. Once again, Gaddafi applauded. Across the Atlantic, the Reagan administration sprang into action. National Security Decision Directive 207 codified that terrorism would no longer be tolerated as a political tool. Military planners began crafting retribution, while Reagan sought allies. He needed Western cooperation, and he ordered U.S. citizens out of Libya, minimizing the risk of further casualties while preparing for a strike. Matters grew more tense on April 2, 1986, when an explosion tore through the fuselage of TWA Flight 840 above Greece. It had been set off by operatives from the Abu Nidal organization. 4 Americans were lost in the blast, while hundreds struggled to hang on to their lives by grabbing onto anything within reach. 3 days later, La Belle Discotheque, a well-known after-hours hangout for U.S. military personnel in the heart of West Berlin, was targeted. The place was packed with servicemen and locals when a deafening explosion ripped through the club, throwing patrons against walls and across tables. 2 lives were taken instantly, including a U.S. serviceman, and 79 others were injured. Panic erupted as soldiers and civilians alike scrambled through the smoke, eyes burning, lungs stinging, desperate to escape the inferno. 3 terrorist groups claimed responsibility, but U.S. and West German intelligence independently declared that evidence pointed incontrovertibly to Libyan operatives. Intercepted communications from East Berlin pointed to direct coordination with Gaddafi's network. The bomb had been transported via a Libyan diplomatic bag, indicating the attack was a carefully orchestrated act of terror, not a random event. The attacks left no doubt in Washington. They had to act. President Ronald Reagan framed the bombings as acts of war. He described them as direct assaults on U.S. citizens and military personnel abroad. The United States would strike in an effort to deter. Any aggression against Americans would meet swift and decisive retaliation. In the lead-up to the Berlin bombing, the team at the USAF's 48th Tactical Fighter Wing had already drafted more than 30 strike options against Libya. Most relied on 6 F-111 fighter bombers, slipping through French airspace, striking military targets swiftly, and returning before Libyan defenses could react. With that in mind, back in October 1985, the 20th TFW at RAF Upper Hayford flew a top-secret exercise, Operation Ghost Rider, launching 10 F-111Es with practice bombs against a simulated airfield in Labrador, Canada. Lessons from that mission were passed on to the 48th TFW, equipped with the newer F-111F model. Meanwhile, 6 specially trained B-52H crews from the 23rd Bombardment Squadron in Minot, North Dakota, operated as the Advanced Conventional Task Force. They drilled low-level conventional bombing missions, becoming the first B-52 crews to use night vision goggles, and delivering 6 strings of Mark 117 munitions, seconds apart, with pinpoint accuracy. Over 6 months, they dropped more live ordnance in Nevada and Utah than had been expended since the end of Vietnam, creating a powerful follow-on option if needed. Even elements of the then-secret 4450th Tactical Group, including over 30 F-117 Nighthawk stealth aircraft operating from Tonopah Test Range, were on standby. This stealth mission, unknown to European command, was ultimately scrubbed by Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger to prevent compromise of the program. Even without the F-117s, it was decided that the raid would be flown with conventional USAF and Navy aircraft, but the tight inter-service coordination, exhaustive planning, and rehearsed contingencies made the operation unprecedented in scale and complexity. The operation bore the official name El Dorado Canyon, and planners knew they had to strike soon, or the fleeting window for surprise would close forever. U.S. planners faced a sudden, formidable obstacle. Allies were balking. Britain's Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher approved the use of British bases for the strike, but France, Germany, Italy, and Spain lost their nerve. Fear of retaliation and potential economic consequences made the European powers hesitant to cooperate. Plans that depended on speed, surprise, and a short flight path were thrown into doubt. The reluctance exposed serious fractures within NATO, leaving the United States diplomatically isolated just as the mission's stakes and the urgency to act were at their highest. Knowing that delay could embolden Gaddafi and hesitation could cost American lives, the United States needed to strike now. This forced a radical rethink. USAF F-111s would now have to skirt France and Spain, navigate the narrow Strait of Gibraltar, then plunge eastward across the Mediterranean until in range of Libyan targets. The mission became an exhausting 6,400-mile round trip, stretching across 13 hours of non-stop flying through hostile skies. Each aircraft required 8 to 12 mid-air refuelings, forcing them to implement maneuvers demanding split-second timing and flawless coordination that pushed crews and complex avionics to the limit. Standard NATO F-111 sorties lasted about 2 hours. This mission would stretch pilots, navigators, and ground support to the edge. Compounding the problem, secrecy had been compromised. Persistent media coverage, fueled by leaks from senior White House sources, was eroding the little element of surprise that was left. Despite the geographical setbacks, U.S. authorities stitched together a joint Air Force-Navy operation aimed at 5 high-value Libyan targets, designed to blunt the regime's military reach and its terror infrastructure. Tripoli held the primary prizes. These included Bab al-Azizia, Gaddafi's fortified compound and nerve center, the military intelligence headquarters that directed agents abroad, and a cluster of air defense sites that could turn the night sky into a lethal trap. Benghazi would be hit simultaneously, with Benina Airfield and nearby military barracks selected to cripple eastern Libyan forces. Each target was important, but none was without risk. Planners argued over every detail, weighing the military need against the potential danger to civilians. Controversy had followed the strike almost from the start. Critics claimed the Navy alone could have carried out the raid, using only the aircraft aboard USS America and Coral Sea. Some argued that Air Force involvement was little more than bureaucratic appeasement. The truth was far more complex. When Washington decreed that only a single strike would be mounted, the inclusion of F-111Fs became indispensable. The Navy had 2 carriers in the Mediterranean, but their combined air groups could not deliver the firepower needed to hit all 5 targets in Tripoli and Benghazi simultaneously. Adding a 3rd or 4th carrier would have introduced delays and jeopardized the element of surprise. Admiral William Crowe, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, weighed the options. A strike on both cities demanded a seamless blend of forces. Air Force F-111s to punch in from unexpected directions, while Navy A-6s, A-7s, and EA-6Bs neutralized radar and SAM threats. Together, the services created overlapping axes of attack, keeping Gaddafi's defenses off balance and maximizing the shock of the assault. The number of aircraft assigned to the mission ran counter to the recommendations of the 48th leadership, including Colonel Sam W. Westbrook III. With the possibility of surprise compromised, they worried the large formation would leave the 9 aircraft assigned to strike the Azizia barracks exposed too long, giving Libya's alert defenses time to concentrate fire. Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger, supported by senior Air Force officers, pushed for the larger strike, arguing it maximized the chance of inflicting substantial damage. The F-111Fs themselves were exceptional machines. Each carried 2 Pratt & Whitney TF-30 P-100 engines, generating 25,100 pounds of thrust, and the classified AN AVQ-26 PaveTac targeting system. The infrared camera and laser designator could pierce darkness, light fog, or dust, guiding a GBU-10 Pave Way II bomb with pinpoint accuracy. Furthermore, standoff attacks allowed the crews to lob bombs from a distance, reducing exposure to radar and missile fire. Precision alone wasn't enough. To deliver these guided munitions on targets thousands of miles away, the strike force needed constant fuel support. Due to the mission's range, KC-10 tankers would not only refuel the strike aircraft, but also refuel one another in a leapfrogging relay across the Atlantic and Mediterranean. Even with Vietnam veterans at the helm, many pilots were green in combat and night refueling. They had to meet at exact waypoints, often in total radio silence. One missed link, and a fighter could be stranded hundreds of miles from safety. The rigorous rules of engagement compounded mission difficulty. Before any attack could proceed, the target had to be positively identified through multiple sources, and all mission-critical F-111 systems had to be fully operational. Any critical failure, even in the last seconds of a bomb run, required an immediate abort, leaving no room for error. All of this, along with the coordination with the Navy's distant carriers, made this the longest and most demanding strike mission in history. On April 14, 1986, at 5:36 p.m., 24 F-111Fs of the 48th Tactical Fighter Wing lifted off from RAF Lakenheath. 5 EF-111A electronic warfare aircraft followed, ready to protect the strike force. Tankers launched at nearly the same time, rendezvousing in complete radio silence and flying in such tight formation that radar picked up only a single consolidated signature. According to the plan, 6 F-111Fs and 1 EF-111A would return after the first refueling, about 90 minutes out, effectively reducing the number of aircraft facing the most dangerous and fatiguing stretch of the mission. Beyond Land's End, the bombers would be outside European control, threading a path over the Atlantic and hundreds of miles from any friendly base. Navigation lights stayed off, radios were silent, and terrain-following radar hummed as the aircraft skimmed waves and rolling hills, hugging the surface to avoid detection. A single misread altitude or heading could send a jet into the unforgiving sea or a radar-guided missile. Further away, USS America and USS Coral Sea launched A-6 intruders, A-7 Corsairs, and FA-18 Hornets in tight sequences. EA-6B prowlers swept behind, electronic warfare systems humming to create safe corridors for the F-111s, approaching from hundreds of miles to the north. Pilots climbed into the night, the coastline shrinking beneath them, invisible to Libyan eyes. As night deepened, somewhere over the Gulf of Sidra, the first shadows of confrontation were already forming. In Libya, decades of Soviet expertise had left a web of radar stations, surface-to-air missile batteries, and anti-aircraft artillery spanning Tripoli, Benghazi, and the approaches between. SA-3s and the newer SA-5s bristled on the coastline and near the desert, their guidance systems ready to track any intruder. MiG interceptors were on high alert, ready to scramble. Gaddafi had drawn a bold line across the Mediterranean, the so-called Line of Death, along the northern edge of the Gulf of Sidra. He declared the waters south of this 3,200 square mile stretch to be Libyan territory, warning that any foreign ship or aircraft crossing it would be fired upon. Yet the F-111 strike pressed forward, threading through defenses with electronic countermeasures from EF-111s masking radar signatures, and meticulously timed navigation, keeping the formation out of reach of MiGs and SAMs. However, unbeknownst to the strike crews, Malta, just a short flight across the Mediterranean and politically tethered to the region, was already on alert. Prime Minister Carmenu Mifsud Bonici had been notified of the aircraft's presence by Italy's Bettino Craxi. Italian authorities had detected the unidentified aircraft off Sicily's west coast and scrambled F-104 starfighters, only to be warned away by pilots with unmistakable American accents. At around midnight GMT, 9 F-111Fs each bore down on Tripoli, the fatigue of the long mission forgotten as pilots' eyes clung to terrain-following radar screens. At Bab al-Azizia, the fortified compound of Gaddafi's command, the first laser-guided bombs arced silently before detonating in blinding bursts. Concrete shattered, walls crumbled, and plumes of smoke rose against the moonlit sky. Colonel Westbrook's concerns proved prescient. 9 aircraft were too many for this target, and only 3 of the 9 F-111s struck the primary targets, severing command and communications nodes critical to Libyan operations. Dropping all 9 at once could have caused overlap or struck unintended parts of the compound, raising the risk of collateral damage or compromising the mission. Meanwhile, an element from the strike force veered toward the Sidi Bilal terrorist training camp, a sprawling complex with a main academy, a secondary academy, a Palestinian training facility, and a partially constructed maritime school. Pave Way II bombs carved the camp apart, destroying key naval commando training infrastructure and crippling Libya's operational readiness. 2 other strike groups targeted Tripoli's airport with Mark 82 Snake-Eye 500-pound bombs. The runways and aprons were ripped apart. 3 Ilyushin IL-76 transports were destroyed and 3 others damaged. A Boeing 727, along with a Fiat G222, was put out of commission, effectively grounding Libya's airlift and transport capabilities. F-111As, Navy A-7s, A-6Es, and an EA-6B scrambled to jam radar and suppress defenses, firing HARM and Shrike missiles. SAM crews flared missiles, but most found only empty air as electronic countermeasures confused their guidance. At nearly the same hour, 6 F-111Fs, supported by Navy A-6Es, A-7s, and electronic warfare aircraft, cut east toward Benghazi. Their target was Benina Airfield and the adjoining military barracks. The first bombs hit the runways. Explosions tore open the concrete, leaving behind craters that crippled the airfield. Grounded aircraft, such as transports, trainers, and utility planes, were shredded where they stood, glooming in flames across the tarmac. Navy A-6Es destroyed 4 MiG-23s, 2 Fokker F-27s, and 2 Meal Mi-8 helicopters. Just as it had happened in Tripoli, radar operators tracked phantom targets. SAMs fired blindly, and MiG interceptors never reached the fight. In barely 11 minutes, the combined Air Force and Navy strike had crippled Libya's command, airport, and air power capabilities. A regime that had once seemed untouchable now found itself reeling, its command scattered and its defenses silenced in a single night. As the F-111 returned, news of the raid was already broadcast on Armed Forces Radio, including commentary from Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger and Secretary of State George P. Shultz. Even though all 3 primary targets had been engaged successfully, only 4 of the 18 111Fs dropped bombs. 6 had to turn back because of mechanical problems or rules of engagement constraints. 7 missed their targets. Collateral damage included 1 bomb landing near the French embassy. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi and his family had evacuated their Bab al-Azizia home moments before the bomb struck, forewarned by a telephone call from Malta's prime minister. The combined Air Force-Navy raid reportedly caused 130 civilian casualties, a mix of military personnel caught in their posts and civilians unlucky enough to be near collapsing buildings and ruptured infrastructure. Reportedly, among the bodies was an infant girl, said to be Gaddafi's recently adopted daughter, Hana. The image of her body was presented to American reporters, but historians and later investigations cast doubt on the claim. Hana may have never existed, may have been a posthumous adoption, or perhaps a second child had received the same name. After rebels seized Bab al-Azizia, the New York Times reported evidence, including photos showing Hana alive and later working as a doctor in Tripoli. Her passport listed a birth date of November 11, 1985, making her only 6 months old at the time of the raid. Whether real or manipulated, the story became a powerful symbol of the human toll of the raid. Western reports claimed that Gaddafi was struck by flying debris when his house was hit, injuring his shoulder. The Libyan government never confirmed the injury, and the account was never independently verified. Nevertheless, he remained out of sight for about 24 hours, and when he reappeared, he was visibly disturbed, lacking his usual arrogance. Libya protested, but received muted support from Arab nations and no decisive backing from Moscow. Most importantly, Libya-sponsored anti-American terrorist activity sharply declined in the following months, with groups like the Red Army faction reducing operations. However, not every jet made it back. As the strike packages peeled away, one F-111F, callsign Karma 52, failed to rejoin the formation. Pilot Captain Paul Lawrence and weapons systems officer Captain Fernando Ribas Dominici had flown deep into the heart of Tripoli's defenses. Somewhere between the city and the open Mediterranean, the aircraft disappeared. Controllers aboard airborne command posts scanned radar and communications channels for any sign of the jet, but nothing came. No transponder signals, no radio calls. Libyan air defense crews boasted that multiple American aircraft had been shot down, with Gaddafi claiming 3 victories, but post-mission analysis confirmed that only Karma 52 had been lost. The exact cause remains unclear, whether a surface-to-air missile, an anti-aircraft shell, or an accident during evasive maneuvers over the water. In the hours following the attack, the U.S. military refrained from speculation, with Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger could have experienced radio trouble or been diverted. By the next day, the Pentagon announced it was no longer searching for the missing jet. On December 25, 1988, Gaddafi offered to release the body of Lawrence through Pope John Paul II. However, only Ribas Dominici's body was eventually returned in 1989 and identified by dental records. An autopsy in Spain confirmed he had drowned after the aircraft was downed. Libya denied holding Lawrence, though his brother recalled seeing footage of a Libyan holding a white helmet marked with Lawrence's name. Investigators touring Bab al-Azizia later reported seeing 2 flight suits and helmets engraved with Lawrence and Ribas Dominici alongside the wreckage of the F-111. The bombing unleashed a storm of international condemnation. The United Nations General Assembly voted 79-28, with 33 abstentions, adopting Resolution 4138, denouncing the strikes as a violation of the UN Charter and international law. The non-aligned movement decried the operation as a, quote, dastardly, blatant, and unprovoked act of aggression. At the same time, the League of Arab States expressed outrage, framing it as a destabilizing act that deepened anarchy in international relations. The African Union, Iran, China, and the Soviet Union each condemned the attacks, citing violations of international norms, destabilization of the region, and the use of force without legal justification. Western allies were divided. Britain praised the strikes for their coordination and precision, while France criticized the US, arguing that disputes should be resolved diplomatically, not militarily. Germany and other European nations echoed calls for restraint, warning that aggressive interpretations of self-defense could normalize preemptive strikes worldwide. The Wall Street Journal and British officials agreed, warning that other nations might follow suit, risking global chaos. Washington, however, stood firm. The Reagan administration framed the operation as self-defense. Legal advisor Abraham Sofer argued that attacks on Americans abroad justified proportionate action. U.S. officials maintained that the operation complied with the 1973 War Powers Resolution, having consulted Congress and provided notification within 48 hours of hostilities. The administration cited the attack as a necessary measure against terrorist havens. In the months and years that followed, evidence surfaced that Libya continued to pursue anti-American operations, often covertly and through proxies. In September 1986, just months after the raids, Libyan support was alleged in the hijacking of Pan Am Flight 73 in Pakistan, which claimed the lives of 20. Libya also financed domestic groups to strike on U.S. soil. In October 1986, Gaddafi backed Jeff Fort's al-Rukin faction of the Chicago Black P. Stones gang, arming and training members to carry out attacks, including bombings and assassination plots targeting American officials. British and American hostages linked to Libya were executed in Beirut, while attacks in Jerusalem and other cities sent a chilling message. Retaliation was unpredictable and often deadly. The most notorious act came on December 21, 1988, when Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland, slaughtering 270. While the bombing achieved immediate tactical gains, strategic effects were muted, illustrating a sobering lesson of modern conflict. Destruction of infrastructure does not automatically curtail ideology, networks, or the pursuit of vengeance. Notably, El Dorado Canyon exposed problems with the F-111s, leading the Air Force to take steps to fix them. That effort paid great dividends 5 years later during Operation Desert Storm, when the Pave TAC-equipped F-111F ended up flying the most sorties and striking more targets than any other aircraft during the conflict.